Thank you. Here comes the judge. How are you, John? You have Liz, you have a birthday coming next month, don't you? Don't you have a birthday next month? I did. 92 and holding. That's why I'm seated. November 18. 18. When's yours? 16. And my niece is today, 29. Yep. Yeah.
Right. Agree?
Sure. Go ahead, honey.
Good morning, everyone. I hope wherever you were.
Testing.
Thursday, you had a day of grace and blessing, whether you're by yourself or 1, 2, 3, or 30 people, whatever. So I hope you had a really wonderful time. It's wonderful always, again, to welcome back Barb, who's going to be leading our Advent series, and to bring joy and grace to our end of the liturgical year, but we're beginning a new one. Mm-hmm. We're beginning it this very weekend. So warm welcome to Barb, and thank you for all of you that are here this morning, and welcome to all who are watching, too. We appreciate that as well, and Jeff and Nora's great ministry. I have a funeral at 11 o'clock, so I have some few things to do, but welcome. Glad you're here. Jeff, I'm going to pass it to...
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
We'll end a little early for the funeral, just so you know. And also, some of you have heard of Sister Grace Miller, and her funeral is happening right now at the Mother House. Mercy Center, I should say. That's what we call it. She worked in the inner city since Moses wore short pants. Yeah, and that was her life. You know Grace, don't you? Yeah. Well, I want to welcome everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I want to welcome everybody, and I want to thank the Clevelands for bringing me here. When the ice comes near my home, they pick me up and bring me. Thanks for Rob, Jeff, and your daughter. Just wonderful contributions. I've selected a theme of new beginnings. Remember in Lent we did resurrection theme. Today I want to do something called new beginnings. And I want to ask you this. Have you ever been asked to take on a task you felt unprepared to do? Maybe motherhood. I remember when I worked for Congresswoman Slaughter, Marion Wright Edelman was the Children's Defense Fund person, and there was a lot of attention given to children and their problems. And so Louise called me into her office. I loved her, but she was hard to work for because she wanted things done. Oh, here comes my pal. We'll wait for a minute. Good morning. Hi, Mike. Don't be sorry. You got it, honey. So anyway, when I was working for Louise, she called me in the office, and anyone who worked for her got a certain area, like foreign policy. Matthew Clark said I could work for her, but I had to stay away from abortion. I said, that's okay. But I had children and women's health and so forth. So she called me in the office and she said, Barbara, I'd like to have a summit for children. I said, gee, that sounds nice. Do it. Yeah. And so we ended up with about 4,000 or 5,000 people at the War Memorial. And I put together a committee, but I did not know my knee from my elbow. it was a whole new beginning for me. And if it hadn't been for a committee I put together, I don't know, but it was a success. And Marion Wright Edelman was the commencement speaker at the Divinity School. So we were able to, she was there in the morning and we were able to have her in the afternoon. And it was wonderful. But I remember when she said, make it happen. And it was a new beginning for me that I felt swamped. I want to take this theme of a new beginning and explore the characters and the stories of Advent, male, female, couples, examples of power, as well as our own stories, so that we can all relate to the new beginnings of this season. I just wanted to ask for a moment, have you ever faced something that was a new beginning for you that you thought you just couldn't handle it? Have you? Yeah, had it. Can one come to your mind there, Susie Q?
Right now.
Not right now, okay.
No.
Oh.
I mean right now. Right now.
Oh, right now as you age?
No, as I talk about and think about what we're talking about right now.
Oh, it's bringing something to your mind.
Yes.
Yeah, new beginnings.
Yes.
I can't imagine what it's like bringing home a child for new parents, or realizing a health situation that would be a brand new beginning for you. Yeah, aging is a new beginning.
Yes.
And I really don't like it. I turned 92. The alternative, I don't want to face that either. So the first week together, I'm going to look at the theme of new beginnings with the Gospel of Matthew, who will be our companion during this new year. Who he was, and the themes that surface, his audience, the difference between and among the Gospels, and John, as a gospel writer, is scattered through the liturgical year. So we're beginning a new liturgical year this Sunday. Next week, I want to talk about new beginnings for couples. Well, not all were married. I'm thinking of Simeon, Mary, and Joseph. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of Elizabeth and Zechariah. And I'm thinking of Simeon and Anna, who were in the temple. And so much must have happened to them with the new beginnings of the birth of Jesus. The third role, I'd like to look at the new beginnings for Jesus growing up and his cousin John. How they saw their ministries, the differences between them, and how their lives ended, and the similarities between them. And the last week, please God, reactions to new beginnings, the Magi, the shepherds, but then Herod. What was his reaction, and the families he attacked because of Jesus? And we'll be drawing on all of the Gospels as well as Matthew's Sunday readings. Okay, so that theme, new beginnings, is that laid out okay? Mm-hmm. We're all okay. So today and tomorrow, we are beginning one of the most important liturgical seasons of the year. The new beginnings are not always easy, are they? When Louise asked me to do that, I just didn't know where to start. And you've all had a new job, a new child, a new relationship. New beginnings are not easy. But we are beginning a new liturgical year. And in 1969, during the Vatican Council, a new beginning unfolded when they presented a 3-year liturgical cycle. It was introduced. And the 3 years had letters A, B, and C. And each year one of those highlighted one of the three Gospels. Among them, Matthew is year A, we're in that now. Mark is year B, and we just finished Luke, year C. And John is interspersed between and among them. In the 3-year cycle, this new beginning exposes all of us to the many parts of the Gospels, but it's important to understand the differences between and among them. When they were written, why they were written, and what the audience was. They all were about new beginnings. My guess is as children grow and their needs differ, you have to select messages to give them understandings of life and time, and it's the same with the Gospels. Thomas Wright has written a book, Advent for Everyone, and he's made this statement. Let me just put on my glasses. Advent for Everyone. And he writes, the early Christians developed the church year as a way of telling, learning, and reliving the story of Jesus, which stands at the heart of our faith. We go round the circuit beginning this weekend. We go Advent to Christmas, to Epiphany, to Lent, to Holy Week, Good Friday, Easter, and Pentecost, and then around again. We're signing on as part of God's larger project, God's forward purposes and plans for all of creation. So Advent is a wonderful season. Many believe that Matthew's gospel was the first of the four. But Mark, after much research, has really claimed that title. His is the first and the shortest gospel. And we discovered that through history, language, and clues in the documents. Think of an impact of a decade on a nation, or the impact of a decade on your life. Think of the struggles our nation faces just during the last decade, and what will be written and said about us as people look back on us. The earliest gospel, according to scholars, is Mark, written in the 60s, about 30 years after the death of Jesus. Think about that. A lifetime for so many people in that era. 30 years was, for some, just the span of their lifetime. Rome was a great power. The temple was still standing, but the message of Jesus was beginning to spread. Mark's gospel is the shortest of the four. In fact, scholars have said to us that Matthew was written sometime between the 80s and the 90s. Now think of all that happened when Jesus died somewhere in the 30s. And so he's labeled year A. Mark is B. Luke and Acts written between 80 to 85, year C. And John way into the 90s. But he was familiar with the other three. There's a book called The Gospel Parallels, which is interesting, and you open it up and Greek's on one side, so I leave that there. But on this side, they take each of the Gospels from their beginning through the end, and they compare the four of them together. And you can see the similarities, and you can see the differences because of the audience that each one dealt with. Also, we note the differences between the Gospels and what happened during the times they wrote. During all of them, Rome was a huge power and a violent power, but a creative power. Paul was converted, and in 70, before even all of the Gospels were written, the temple was destroyed. All of the 4 Gospels were written for different audiences, and some use sources like it's a German source called Q. But there are other Gospels out there that people accepted, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Thomas, but the church has not accepted them. And so when we look at the crib that will eventually be raised and put together here at St. Catherine's, it's really a combination of all the Gospels together, the characters. So we're into cycle A, which is a new beginning and a new church year. Matthew's Gospel has been called a Jewish commentary. There are several reasons why this is true. Because the Gospel of Matthew, as he's trying to present a new beginning to the community, the Gospel tries to connect the Jewish scripture texts to Jesus' story. His audience was largely Jewish Christian. Matthew could use the Jewish texts without much explanation because his audience understood them. And his context was also influenced by the destruction of the Roman temple, the Jewish temple, by the Romans. That was absolutely critical to the life of the Jewish community. It brought to mind what some of us thought when the East Wing on the White House was taken down, and what that meant to presidential administrations over the years, and the first ladies who had their offices there. But that reaction was absolutely minor compared to the destruction of the temple. For the temple for the Jews held God, and it contained the identity of the Jewish people. There was a new beginning without the temple, which was not easy. And Matthew's Gospel has 5 large blocks of material, and it made me think of the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Some people think Matthew's Gospel may be a revision or a second edition of Mark. It was written between 85 and 90. Now that's, if he died in 30, that's a lifetime. People had gone through all kinds of new beginnings and changes. We're not sure who Matthew was. His origin is somewhere in Palestine. And his text, according to some, was written to preserve the Jewish tradition, and that was going on within a Jewish Christian movement. And so a Jewish Christian community was a new beginning. What do you think the new beginnings are for you and me as we begin this Advent season? What do you think might be the new beginnings for us? Susie, just put the mic up there.
Sorry.
That's all right.
We're always going to have new political beginnings. I'm kind of curious to see where women go as we go forward. The new Pope and women definitely piques my curiosity.
Yeah, me too. He is an unusual new beginning for us. Jeff, you saw him in action, didn't you? At the youth, yeah. There's something about the fact we have never had a pope with the culture of North America. Now, I know he has the Peruvian roots too, but you can see that his American culture coming through. And he did, I don't think we'll get ordained as deacons, but he has said that male and female are equal. I haven't heard that in a while.
How about ever?
Forever, yeah. What, dear?
Sister, you mentioned the Pope. We were at NCYC, and the Pope spoke to 16,000 teenagers in a stadium in Indianapolis, and he was probably 50 feet tall, and he spoke to all these teens, and 5 or 6 teenagers came up and asked him questions, and it was like he was speaking to all of us. And just sitting in the stands in the stadium, it was just like he was embracing technology, and this was the first time this has ever been done.
Yeah.
And it was incredible, and all the teens were chanting, "We love Pope Leo," and it was like it was really incredible. It was the first time, and all of these teens went away thinking that we love this guy, and all of us are so excited to see what happens.
Yeah. And it's a moment in history that we are fortunate enough to be living to experience it. Thanks, Jeff. I just think he is unusual. And he is speaking directly in many ways to the United States, not the way I've heard other popes speak. And I loved his statement about respect for life. First thing he said. And he didn't focus on just one issue, abortion, which is critical. But he said, for those of us that just focus on abortion alone, we've missed the point. Because respect for life covers environment, and it covers the question of peace. It covers the question of the death penalty, as well as the life issue. That was quite a statement. I think we're fortunate to have him. So, here, you, go ahead.
I think another big change that we Catholics are facing is the shortage of clergy. We're parishioners at St. John of Rochester, and our pastor has announced he's retiring in June. That's a big question. Father Rob has had the challenge of bringing together 2 parishes simultaneously. And as we look at the logistics in our country, within 10 years, the shortage of priests is going to be doubled or tripled.
Yeah. Well, I'm a Sister of Mercy of the Americas. When I joined the community, we had 400 and some members. The Joes had 1,000. Did you? Almost 1,000, yeah. You were always double us. And we eventually, as a community, there were independent groups and there were provinces. Eventually, in the early 90s, we decided, the Mercies, North America, South America, Guam, the Philippines, we came together to form the Institute of the Sisters of Mercy. And the numbers, I mean, every day I open up my email and there's a sister, 92, who died. Oh, please. Then, or somebody, 91, we're dying. And one of our sisters, Jean Reichert, she had a little education. She did a thing about what happened to us when we came here and so forth. And she said, there's a book that's been written that says every 300 years, religious orders change. And so I have a sense that we have 24 women who are interested in our community, mostly from third world countries. I have a sense that we're going through that. And the book talks about the Beguines in the Middle Ages they didn't take a vow of celibacy, but they all lived together. And then there were the Carmelites and all different groups. And in the 1800s, the religious orders became outreach missionary. That's when we came to the United States, 1831. But the world is changing. And there are more opportunities for women to live out their Christian message. And I think Ruth would agree with me, it's not easy to see those sisters dying and knowing we'll be on the list soon. But it's a change. And there's another book written by Phyllis Tickle that talks about every 500 years, there is a change within the Christian community. So when the early church was established, we go up into the 400s in the Nicene Creed. Then we get to the thousands, 1054, and the Orthodox leave. Then we get to the 1500s, and the Protestant Reformation takes place. Well, now we're 500 years. And what God has for us, I don't know. But there are critical issues that are facing the church. Issues of vocations. But people are living out their faith in different ways. It's like a new beginning for us, but when you're at the tail end of it, it's not fun. It's not fun. And it's not fun for people like Rob, the amount of work he has to do. I have a good friend, Ray Fleming, and he is pastor of the deaf, which was at St. Monica's, where I worked. But then the population was dropping, and so St. Monica's formally closed, Augustine's closed, the Church of the Deaf closed, and Our Lady of Good Counsel closed, and eventually Peter and Paul. And then they all said, all right, we're coming together, but where will we be housed? And they chose St. Monica's, which was right because it was handicapped accessible with a big parking lot. But he's got 5 parishes, plus Immaculate Conception. And he's not healthy. So it's so important that you and I, as Christians, pick up the slack where we can. It's fascinating. So Matthew was writing to a community that was facing something very new, a new beginning, a Jewish Christian community. And I think sometimes we don't appreciate that when we look at the differences in the Gospels. Historically, they were trying to meet a need. There is a Gospel of Thomas, there's a Gospel of Judas, there's a Gospel of Mary Magdalene, a whole bunch of them. But the church has settled on these 4. And the new beginning of this liturgical year really was created by Vatican II. So we are now into cycle A. Any question about that? Is it yeah. Well, the thing that's nice about it is that we realize that the gospel writers, I remember a retreat person I had, she said, picture a table, and here are Mark's words, here are Matthew's words, here are Luke's, and here are John's. So the pastor, say St. Matthew, says, what does my community need? And he goes to the stories about Jesus that would meet the needs of their community. But the needs of Mark's community and Matthew's community are different. And we never were taught the difference between and among the four Gospels that met the needs of a community. Think of my mother and father, my mother would be 124. When she heard the gospel in Latin, what did that mean to her? Now we have it in our language, and now we understand each one of these, plus the others, were written to meet the needs of the community they served. They were launching, so to speak, new beginnings. So that's what we're about this first Sunday in Advent, a new beginning. Does that make sense? Yeah. And I think it helps us understand the differences between and among them, because they weren't thinking about us necessarily. They were thinking about the group. Like Rob, when he preaches, thinks about this community at St. Catherine's. The needs of transfiguration might be a little different. That means it's hard for him to help each community get the message they need. Make sense? Well, I want to read for you the gospel that you'll hear this weekend, and I want you to think about this. Now, this is the first Sunday of Advent, and here is Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, he hasn't been born yet. It's the first Sunday of Advent. Jesus says to his disciples, as it was in the days of Noah, so will it be at the coming of the Son of Man. In those days before the flood, they were eating, drinking, being married, given in marriage, up to the day that Noah entered the ark. Why are we going all the way back there, the first Sunday of Advent? They did not know until the flood came and carried them all away. So it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be out in the field, one will be taken, one will be left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken, one will be left. Therefore stay awake, for you do not know on which day your Lord will come. Be sure of this, if the master of the house knew the hour of night when the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and not let the house be broken into. So you must be prepared, for an hour you do not expect the Son of Man will come. Does that sound like an Advent reading? A little heavy. Ruth, does that sound like Advent?
Our community on our website, we have Welcome the Holy, and each weekend one of us gives a reflection on the gospel, and this is my weekend.
Oh, well, 3 cheers for you. We'll help you in any way we can.
But one of the things that I found out in my research was Matthew's envisioning the end of the world similar to Noah, but Isaiah in the first reading has an entirely different version of the end of the world.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting. Yeah.
It is, and Matthew's gospel begins with the genealogy, which we've talked about before, which is a new beginning to see where Jesus came from. But this first reading, you would think it would be like Luke or the Annunciation, first Sunday of Advent, but it's not. It's about the second coming, because Matthew's community was thinking about what it's going to be like when the end comes. Well, it hasn't come yet, except for some, but...
And they thought it was going to be in their lifetime.
They thought it was going to be in their lifetime. And I'm not sure why the bishops or the writers of the lectionary chose this, except the first reading turns toward watchfulness, a new beginning story. But the second coming is also a new beginning. But if you don't have any sense of why he was writing this, it seems strange. It seems strange. It's not until the fourth Sunday in Advent that Matthew shares the birth story. So it's interesting, and it's the focus on Joseph. Matthew's gospel focuses on Joseph. Luke's gospel focuses on Mary. There's a huge difference between them. But there must have been something in Matthew's community that they needed to hear this message. He talks about, in the fourth Sunday of Advent, the birth, the focus on Joseph, the Magi, the flight to Egypt. And so the question is, why at the end of Advent do we have a birth story that's not in the first chapter? Well, his community needed something else. Needed something else. It's fascinating, but if we don't look into the gospel text and why it was written, it can be very confusing. It's important to know what Matthew's community needed, and he was offering it to them. But not till the end of the gospel do we hear the birth story. I want to, keeping my eye here because of the funeral, I want to look at another reading, another book for new beginnings. I came across a book a few years ago which was entitled The Fifth Gospel. And it's written by John Sawyer, and the subtitle is Isaiah in the History of Christianity. Let me just read something for you because it's a fascinating book. Although one of the prophets in what Christians call the Old Testament has been known in the church from early times as more of an evangelist than a prophet, and so the book of Isaiah has been referred to as the fifth gospel. That's because Isaiah played a unique role in all the kinds of context, from the cult of the Virgin Mary to anti-Jewish polemic, medieval passion iconography to 20th century Christian feminism and liberation theology. St. Jerome said in the 4th century, Isaiah should be called an evangelist rather than a prophet, because he describes all the mysteries of Christ and the church so clearly you would think he is composing a history of what has already happened rather than prophesying about what is to come. And in the Gospels, we are told, one estimate gives the total number of possible passages in which Isaiah seems to be referred to as 250. That the Gospel writers went back to Isaiah and found words in him that spoke to the situation of the life of Jesus. 250 references in the New Testament. That's what he's called the fifth gospel. What do you think about that, pal? It's interesting. Isaiah is something. So, that's what I want to say about the coming first Sunday of Advent. We're waiting. If it was Luke, we would be hearing the Annunciation. But in Matthew, we're hearing the end story. Doesn't sound like Advent. Does this information about the Gospels make sense? Think so, Michael?
My question is, Sister, in the community that existed during the time that these Gospels were being written, were they really practicing the Jewish religion? I mean, in other words, they hadn't yet started a new religion.
I wouldn't even say started a new religion. I would put them in that in-between period. They were faithful Jews, but they were taken with the work of the 12 apostles, with the message of Jesus. And he never indicated that he was going to abandon his Jewish faith.
Right.
He never indicated that. And, you know, remember, he's totally human as well as totally divine. So that's a great mystery. Did he fully know yet what he was called to? But he knew that he was called to something unique. And he sometimes made the statement that, hello, sir, can I? Okay. He sometimes made the statement that you haven't been following the law the way the law was intended. He was calling them to something deeper and not so superficial. He was critical. And whether he knew at this point he was the Messiah, he knew he was called to call his people back to the original meaning of their faith.
Well, a very significant factor in the early church was this issue is, did a person have to become Jewish before they could become a Christian?
Right.
And I forgot what council.
Well, it was in the 70s.
And was it Paul that said, that's the way I'm going to do it, and convinced the leaders that non-Jewish people could become Christian and meet all of the requirements?
Exactly. There was in Jesus' day total unhappiness with some of the non-Jewish communities around them. They had been conquered by Babylon. Their temple was destroyed by Rome. But Jesus continued to show them and ask them to have a broader vision of life. So he sits down with the woman at the well. He talks to the woman caught in adultery. He tells the parable of the Good Samaritan. So what he's doing is saying, I am a faithful Jew, but I want you to look at the roots of your faith and what God is calling you to. And that's what I think Pope Leo is doing. I think he's calling us back to the message, the original message of Jesus, love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus, as much as said, I don't care if they're an adulterer, a tax collector, a Samaritan, love your neighbor as yourself. And I think in our nation right now, this is just Barbara, some want us to be named a Christian nation. Well, which brand of Christianity are you going to follow? And do you understand the Gospels? Because what Jesus was teaching was absolutely radical for his day. And the Gospel writers were picking the oral stories of Jesus and picking the ones that meant something to their community or what their community needed. Paul think of his career. He's after new Christians and killing them. And then he has a revelation, a new beginning. And then he begins to see, and Isaiah points to this, that the Gentiles are going to be part of the believing community. And Paul was the one who pushed it. And as you said, somewhere in the 70s, there was a battle. They were trying to say, well, we'll accept the Gentiles, but they have to be circumcised.
Yes.
And Paul said no. And that split the community a bit. But what Paul was doing was expanding the margins, expanding. And so today, Leo is saying to us, I want you to really love the migrant. And a lot of people in our country say, well, we're going to just get rid of them all. And that's why I just think, Leo, I haven't liked a pope. Well, I loved Francis and I loved John the 23rd, but I just think to have the courage to say that, if you really read the words of Jesus and hear his parables like the Good Samaritan, it would be like saying, you just can't do this to migrants. They're God's children. You just can't take them off the street and not give them a fair hearing or a place to live. And I'm not saying they're perfect. No one's perfect but thee and me, as my mother used to say, and I doubt it about thee, Barbara. But it's the message, the Christian message is very radical. And Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John picked the messages that were going to mean something to their community. Are you with me or against me? All right. Well, it's almost time. I don't like to end, but I see the people coming in. Thank you so much. You know how kind it is for you to have me. I mean, I stumble coming in, but once I'm here, I'm okay. Aging is not for the faint-hearted, right, Michael? Absolutely not for the faint-hearted. Thank you so much. Next week, we're going to look at individuals. You're great people to take and come. What, Lovey? It's wonderful for me. I don't know how long I can do it, but I'm good. You know, but Jeff said to me, if I get to the point where I can't, he'll come to my house